feels their, oops, okay, we feel that the business owner oftentimes thinks their business is worth a lot more than it really is, because they've heard from somebody in town, somebody else who sold their company that doesn't look like the existing company that they're in. They should be getting more dollars out of it, but they really need to have some level of professional expertise come in and give them an idea what that value is, so they can determine, okay, here's how what the value of the company is, a reasonable value, and here's where I'm at today compared to what I need to do to retire, and so they've got a choice to make. Are they at the point in time where they just kind of want to move on? Maybe they don't reach all their retirement goals, but they're willing to move the company today. And I think a lot of business owners are probably there today. They've gone through 9/11, the impact of 9/11. They've gone through the Great Recession, and now they're looking at COVID. And it's kind of three strikes, you're out. They're ready to move on. We're hearing a lot of people are looking at that. So, they may just say, that's fine. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to retire. If not, what can they do with their business? They have to work longer in the business to increase that value when they're going to exit. So they need to find out what drives the value in the business. So so it can be so they can achieve their goals. And oftentimes in the business owner's mind, it's best that they know everything that's going on, they control everything that's going on. But that's not really the case, because when somebody else is buying the business, be it the employees or somebody else, they're going to be relying on somebody outside the business owner for that expertise. So we think this is a real opportunity to kind of embed those skills, transition key functions to key employees, to make that business more successful, more sellable down the road, be it internally or externally. Next slide, please. So why is succession planning for a family or closely held businesses so, why do you hear so much about it today? Excuse me. There's over 4 million of these closely held businesses in the United States. And over the next 20 years, you still have the tail end of the baby boomers and all the Gen X coming through. There's going to be the majority of these privately held businesses are going to transition in the next 20 years. So you really need to prepare for that, because with the majority of those businesses being sold, it's going to be a buyer's market out there. So you really want to make your company stand out. Second, they employ 70% of the workforce and create 2/3 of new jobs. This is just a huge impact, and to ignore succession planning really opens up the opportunity for a real negative impact on local communities. Oftentimes in the past, we saw companies transition to the second generation from a family standpoint, and that is a thing of the past. Only 15% now make it to the second generation, and only about 5% make it to the third generation. So if you run into a company that is third, fourth, or fifth generation, that's a real unique company, because it's just not happening. The children have more opportunities and they don't stay in the business. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. COSI is basically the Small Business Chamber of Commerce in Cleveland, and they've completed studies over the last few years, and unfortunately they still remain the same. There's only about 80% of these businesses really have a formal succession plan. And 80% of these businesses don't have a formal succession plan. Only 20% do. Some of the business owners, it's you ask them and they point at their head and say, it's all up here. Well, if they don't get it out and document what's going on, something happens to them, then it stays up there. It never gets out. So we really want to encourage these folks to get out and start benefiting themselves and everybody else around them, and document what they're hoping to achieve. Next slide, please. So what is succession planning? Succession planning really is strategic planning for the future for both the business and the owner. So it's both sides. Where do I want to go as an individual? Where should the company go as an individual? So at X period in time, it should reasonably look like this type of company with this type of value. It helps the business owner and stakeholders, employees and others, identify goals and helps them to achieve those goals. And here's a real opportunity in it's one where, depending on the situation in the company, how open the owner is to engaging people. It's if you can get the employees and the owner on the same page and start talking about what those long-term plans are, both for the owner and the employees, then you can develop a plan to help both achieve it. We think that's a real opportunity that hasn't happened as much in the past, but given today with all the concerns with COVID and everything, and even before that, just finding people who want to stay engaged in the company long term, I think business owners are opening up more to this idea and really engaging their employees. At least we hope so. We're hearing more of that. We're encouraging more of that, but we aren't on the shop floor to really get a good feel of what's happening. But I think that's happening on an increasing basis, and ultimately, the succession plan results in, it's a plan that's going to help the transfer of the ownership and control of the business to the next generation, be that internally, be that family, or employees, or externally. So it really creates a plan that sets a roadmap for that company to monitor and adjust accordingly as they move forward. Next slide, please. What's a typical succession planning time frame? We say 3 to 7 years or even more really is a great time frame to start thinking about succession. Early adopters, and the big thing that it really provides to everybody is time to increase the value of the business, maybe send it in a new direction that needs to go, get proper training for everybody. And really increase that potential to achieve goals. If a company had a succession plan in place, even if they were thinking, well, we're going to sell by the end of 2020 and, COVID-19 hit, they had a good succession plan in place and they were really working that plan, monitoring that plan. They're in a much better position to make those adjustments now that we're in this pandemic to move forward than somebody who doesn't have a handle on where they're at and where they're going. At least if you have that time, you can make those adjustments. So we think there's going to be a lot of businesses that we're hoping to sell by the end of 2020. Some of those may, but others, they will have the ability to take their plan and adjust it moving forward. So unfortunately, it might be 2022, but at least they'll be able to make those necessary adjustments and keep the business afloat and move it forward. 2 to 3 years is kind of a just-in-time type of scenario. You can't really do a whole lot with making large changes or groom successors. You can start breaking that in, but it reduces the sales options. You really can't look at the broad range of options that we'll get into. 1 or 2 is kind of the scramble, especially when you get into today's situation. I've thought about this, and it's almost today's situation. It's like triage. Where I'm at today, where can I go, given what the impacts may be on my business with COVID. Some companies are doing just fine. Others are actually have a slight uptick, but the ones who have been negatively impacted, how can they move forward? We think more retail. We think more restaurants. A lot of those businesses are just, there's no options at this point, or very limited options. And if there were some more plans and they developed some different avenues of delivery in the past, then they might be able to withstand this COVID pressure. Next slide, please. So what's the transition planning process look like? You start out and there's going to be different iterations for everybody on this, and you're going to see some loops coming back, but we try to put it out on a linear format so you can kind of get an idea just where you're going to go. But I think most businesses, you'd probably see at least 2 or 3 different loops coming back and going through this, depending on what you find. But start, assemble a team of advisors to guide the transition. And or we always stress that it's not just one advisor, it's a team. You need to think of holistically how your business operates. You don't use a general doctor to analyze all your medical issues. You want to have a team of specialists that work in different areas so your whole body, your whole company functions appropriately. So assemble a team of advisors and that understand their roles to start guiding you through that transition. Once you start developing that, you're going to want to look at a feasibility or pre-feasibility study to give you an idea of, okay, if I'm moving down different options, what does that look like? This isn't a full-blown, we're going to jump into it with both feet. But look at different options that make sense, and then at least do some initial work to say, to either rule in or rule out those options to make sure that they're going to be beneficial to you. And once you've really developed that option, you think it's going to work, you investigate it further, and then you start to develop and implement that exit plan that fits your needs. Finally, with that exit plan, it's part of the business planning process. So you develop a business plan, you engage the appropriate people, you assign tasks at the appropriate levels, and you assign time to monitor that. So you want to make sure that you set your goals out and have everybody on the same page to understand how you're going to achieve that. Of course, once you start the plan, then you move forward to execute it. And we jump back to slide, but you move forward to execute it and monitor it as you go. Life doesn't always happen the way we think it's going to happen. So you certainly want to monitor and have a good understanding of where you're at, and then make the adjustments. All companies are making adjustments today in regards to how they're operating their business given the COVID situation. Next slide, please. So, benefits to the business owner, provide strategic options from which to choose. So again, if you have more time, you can investigate, what's going to be the right option for me. And we see, business owners who are all over the board and what drives their decisions. Some it's purely monetary. Other, it's a combination of monetary to keeping the business local, to helping the employees, and there's a whole range in between. So as long as the business owner has options to choose from, they can figure out what's best for them and the others that they want to bring along. As well, with a plan, it helps that company achieve their goals and the owner achieve their personal goals. It can really facilitate retirement. And part of that would be if you have time and you can plan appropriately, you can help minimize or in some cases defer or eliminate some of the tax consequences. So that gives you time, gives you the runway to work through the issues to help figure out how best to transition and reach the goals of everybody involved. Control is a very big factor with a lot of business owners, and once they can see how this transition is going to take place, they can gain a little more comfort in slowly unwind the control and transition it to the appropriate people. As well, a big thing, a lot of the folks I'm sure you're going to be working with, it's families, stakeholders that are tied in. So it can preserve those as long as you blend that in developing the plan. It can really help everybody involved, and it creates some level of certainty. I guess, back in January or December, I'd say create certainty. At least this limits the uncertainty. We'll say it that way. So next slide, please. Benefits to other stakeholders, we'll hit that. Vendors or business partners, both sides of the company, those who are supplying product in or, receiving product or services, if they know that the company has a succession plan, they understand they're going to be more comfortable working with that company and making investments accordingly. It is amazing. We've heard from a lot of business owners, and like I'm 75 and I'm thinking about selling my business, and well, everybody else knows you're thinking about selling your business. You don't have to tell anybody. Something's going to happen. So unfortunately, there are the folks who take it to their grave, and that just creates a lot of issue. But as long as that's out there, you do not have to disclose all the information. But if the other folks know, who you work with know that there's something in place, that's going to create more comfort and continuity in working with them in the future. Certainly, a high impact of this presentation, it's about the employees. Jobs, retaining jobs, really the career aspect. If you start doing succession planning and you're building in the foresight of the future, you can help retain those employees, engage those employees if you're really spelling out what roles they may play in the future. So it makes all the sense in the world to do that. And then the more comfort level there is in the job and the career, it just impacts the family life of the employees and their family. Community as well, beyond just the jobs for the specific employees, but jobs are important, keeping the local economic activity updated, the business base, leadership. We see leadership in a lot of the business owners are part of the civic engagement, part of the civic leadership in that community. So retaining those folks, keeping them engaged is a big part of this. Next slide, please. Costs associated with the lack of proper planning, leaving money on the table, you don't have an opportunity to really pursue opportunities. So it's you end up, if you don't plan, you end up with only a couple of options that might not have been the best options to begin with. And if things really get bad, you lose control over the exit process, and the company closes. You pay more taxes than you should, and the personal goals for everybody involved really don't get realized. Next slide, please. Common reasons, family constraints, conflict. There's a lot of issues. Succession planning, when you get into this, it's very messy in most cases. So people just don't want to go there. It's almost like it's too much work. The business supports the lifestyle. The business owner can't imagine what they would be doing if they weren't doing this. Mortality, life after work issues. Kind of funny, my stint between banking and this role, I worked for a private business, and the guy was going to India, and I was trying to get some things put together. And so, well, what happens if the plane goes down? Speaking of mortality, he said, I'll jump. So sometimes the business owners, just think they aren't going to have these issues. And so to come on the back end of that, he had a heart attack when he was in India. Now, fortunately, everything worked out, but it got a little dicey for a little bit. So reluctance to let go ties in with that. As well, there's sometimes the business owners, they just don't have the right people around. They can't hand off things. And they don't know how to go about engaging and getting the right people. And I think there's a lot of help these days through Jobs Ohio, the university. There's a lot of assistance available, but they don't know how to tap into that. So that's something we can help them get to. Excuse me. An advisory board, not to be confused with the official corporate board. This is, there's some resources on the back end of the slides for you, but it's an opportunity to bring some people in who have, specific expertise, or, perhaps they have expertise in industries that you may want to go through. So it's another way of bringing in some talent that you're not hiring for the permanent basis, and they're engaged as long as necessary, and then you move on. Time is a real factor. Business owners are really buried in working in the business and can't get out and work on the business. And uncertainty. I think especially today, a lot of people are very uncertain what's going to happen in the future. So it's a real challenge. Next slide, please. Real quick, we're just going to talk about the potential inside buyers. I'm not going to go into a great deal of depth here. We can get you more information if you want, but we'll focus on the employees on the other side. Family members, that's always an option. Typically, we see there's not the next generation of family members coming in, so that's a challenge. Partners, that is an option. We do see specific practices like dental practices, those sort of things where they have different partners that they come in. The challenge is if you have a partnership and you have somebody who's 65 and somebody who's 63, is that partner who's 63 really going to buy out the other partner and maintain it for a long period of time? So there's a lot of planning issues, and you need to address that. Management is a good option if you have a good management team. One of the challenges with management is they usually don't have the money, and if the business owner wants some cash to get out, it's going to involve some private equity to come in and make that happen. And private equity will make changes when they see fit. So that management team could be broken up, in short order. So that's just a rocky road, or the potential for a rocky road if there's not enough planning. And the employees, which we'll get into, but and there can be a combination of all the above. Just depends on what the circumstances are. Next slide, please. Outside buyers, strategic buyer within the industry. This could be competitors. They can come in and buy a business, and because there's synergies in what they're doing, they can drive more value. The typical case here is 1 + 1 = 3. They can eliminate some cost, usually jobs. They can maybe cut down the business they're buying and bring that into their own physical structure, so they can generate a lot more profit that way. So strategic buyer could be a great payoff for the business owner, but it's usually the people in the community left behind usually get hit. Same with a strategic buyer in aligned industry, maybe a little bit less because that business or most of that business may stay intact locally because they're just buying the capacity. They don't have the capacity, but it does pull control outside of the area. And a financial buyer is somebody who is just interested in coming in and running a company. They quit their corporate job and they're willing to move forward. They got some dollars. So they're an outside buyer, probably won't make as many changes, but certainly would make changes coming in. Next slide. Here's the thing that I think we're going to see more of right now, but it's a forced sale. You get to the point where you really don't have any other options than to close the shop and move forward. The business owner doesn't maximize the return. It gets pennies on the dollars. Whatever the facility is, that's closed. The jobs are lost, and the local community feels the impact. And I think across Appalachia, as in many rural areas, we've seen this, and this has happened over the years. Probably started back in the 70s and 80s, and so you see a lot of almost ghost towns because of that. So, next slide, please. So real quick, why would you think about selling to the employees? There's potential tax benefits. The employees can be either partial or full owners of the business, so you can take some time. It's more orderly. You maintain that legacy in the community, and you have the ability to help reward the employees for their years of service. Um, the biggest thing is the company must be profitable or have the capability of being profitable and have sound business operations moving forward. Because at the core of what you're doing is you're replacing all that equity that's been built up over time with debt in one form or another. So you've got to have the capability to transition that. Next slide, please. We'll talk real quick about different employee ownership options, ESOPs, worker co-ops, and employee-owned trust. Next slide. What's an ESOP? It's a qualified retirement plan that's offered by a sponsoring company, the operating company, and it purchases shares from the selling entity. All employees who meet minimum qualifications are automatically in the plan. There's a formal document that must be followed. This is very much like, it's in the same category as an IRA or 401k, but a lot like a pension plan with a lot of oversight. So it can be very, it can provide benefits to everybody, but you can't be overly generous to just a small group. They want to make sure everybody benefits from this. Next slide. Forming an ESOP as a succession plan. Typically there's an investigation. It could be the selling owner and others come together. They determine if it's something that makes sense for them and it's feasible. Oftentimes we've worked with folks and they're interested in selling to an ESOP, but it's just not feasible. So they set up the framework, and for the development, there's actually a trustee. An ESOP at its core is a trust, and there's a trustee and the employees, and they negotiate the sale for part of all the company. An ESOP, you don't have to sell all the company. There's certain tax benefits if you're a C corp and you sell 30% of the company. That business owner typically stays in that lead role for a period of time as the succession management team is developed and where a full sale is envisioned. Next slide. What sort of characteristics if you're working with somebody? Probably there's a lot of rules and regulations. So we say typically 50 or more employees. You may need that to make sure you get through all the hurdles of an ESOP. You have to have dependable, positive cash flows. It just has to be, generate cash to pay off the debt that you're going to take on. Additional debt capacity. That means, somebody who already has a lot of debt is not going to be a good candidate for an ESOP, because it's going to be very hard to go get additional debt to pay out the equity of the owner. No parent, family, successor. You have to have the payroll and other factors that tie into meeting the requirements of the ESOP. Other things real quick, we'd like to see a participatory environment where you have a lot of communication, a lot of engagement with the employees. That works much better. And do you have folks who are capable of executing that plan and monitoring it? Next slide. There's tax benefits. We really don't have time, but if you hit our website, you can go into it, or if you want to email me, I can get into the detail. But at different levels, there's tax benefit for the owner, for the company, and the employees. With an ESOP, the employees do not write a check out of their pocket to get shares. They actually are allocated shares over time, and then when they retire, that's when they face any taxes. So, that's tax deferred. So that's a great benefit. And ESOPs allow a lot more of the dollars to stay in the company to be invested and move that company forward. Next slide, please. Disadvantages, I mentioned it, the debt capacity is a big one. They require a lot of planning and monitoring. Probably even jump down, there's people usually point at is both IRS with your standard accounting issues, but Department of Labor, since this is a trust, much like a pension plan, the Department of Labor gets involved, and that makes some real issues. as you can see, there's qualified employees that you have to hire and maintain. So there's real cost associated with it. And that's why smaller companies that don't have enough employees, can't get over that hurdle. They can't make a financial sense to make that happen. Next slide. Real quick on employee or worker-owned co-ops. It's like another co-op. The employee members, they'll pay a membership fee and they receive the patronage allocations over the years. So they, much like your rural co-ops, they're the members. They're like the farmers in a rural farm co-op, a grain elevator. So they own it and they operate it. They're not nearly as expensive to set up and maintain, so they're a real viable alternative to an ESOP for smaller companies. And I think we're seeing more traction in this area going forward. Next slide. Again, they're inexpensive to maintain. They can borrow money from banks. Ultimately, they must be 100% employee owned. They can have other investment, but they must be 100%. In Ohio, there is a 10-year transition period. The selling owner does maintain some control if there's concerns. Usually there's a big note that the selling owner carries for a period of time and they have some rights there. So, the company can't be sold out from underneath them and that sort of thing. The biggest difference, it's one member share, one vote compared to one corporate share, which, there can be thousands. So each individual member has a vote, and you don't see the leveraging of, some members holding, 20,000 shares compared to somebody else having 5. Next slide. Suitable companies for co-op, there's, profitable, just like others, without, just like the ESOP, they have to be profitable. You're going to buy out equity. That participatory work environment is key. 25 or fewer, again, they can be higher, but sometimes the ESOP benefits, if you can make them, that tax benefits are much higher in the ESOP. So we see people go that way if they can make it. And then they incorporate a lot of cooperative type of language in what they're doing. Owners can have the potential to defer capital gains. Owner wants to maintain that legacy. And there are some startup worker co-ops. Most of what we focus on is the transition ones. Next slide, please. Real challenges, though, unlike an ESOP, that's national law, state-specific statutes. Fortunately, Ohio is very favorable. Colorado seems to be one that's very good. So you may have to incorporate in another state, at least your co-op, to make the co-op the most beneficial for you. There's about 600 established co-ops, worker co-ops in the states. There's not nearly as much professional assistance available, although we're seeing more and more people getting trained up, so I think that's going to change. A big challenge is few banks have expertise in co-ops. A lot of the regional banks have a great deal of expertise in ESOPs, and they're comfortable with them because they've been around for a long time. There's much fewer with co-ops. And the owner's likely to remain engaged for a period of time because they're financing a portion. Next slide, please. There's something else out there called a perpetual trust. There's only a few of them in the state. Typically, the trust is put up it's established to create long-term sustainability. It may be around a specific entity. There's one that was a landscaping company up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the city was really encroaching on everything around it, and they formed the trust to keep the business tied in there. So. My screen went blank. Are we ready for questions or?
That is because my screen went blank, so I will try to fix that as you. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that.
I'll talk through a couple real quick, folks that know from different companies. Couple of worker co-ops around that we're familiar with. Patty Cake Bakery, a lot of information out there on Patty Cake. Started in her home. and moved in her operation, sold the business. And Jenny is a very much a cooperative mindset, and she really wanted to make that transition happen. So she made that happen. Second one that I'll just touch on, you're sending out the slides, so there'll be a little point here, I think. Surface Chemist of Florida. They actually, pretty high-end chemical research type of thing, long history. They had a contact in a co-op headquartered up here in the Cleveland area and connected us. They wanted to transition to a worker co-op. They had about, I think, 16 people at the time. Challenge was there is no worker co-op law in Florida. So the Surface Chemist of Florida co-op that has been established is actually an Ohio corporation to take advantage of the Ohio law. The owner, they completed the sale in 2015. I think it was 40% of the shares. And of the cash that the owner received, she owned the building. She just about doubled the capacity of the building they've added on. So she's someone who we see a lot with cooperative people, that she had enough investment outside. She didn't need the cash right away. So she is very willing to reinvest into the company and to make it successful after she, stepped out. So I think there's some information out there. If not, we can get you more on that. But this is an example where they took advantage of Ohio law being in Florida. So if you're in West Virginia or Kentucky, and you don't have those statutes, there are some options to look at on the outside. The other one that I just wanted to hit was Intrust IT. That's a new ESOP, fairly new ESOP in the Cincinnati area. The interesting thing is the owner's father sold his business to ESOP years ago, very successful ESOP. The owner really liked that idea, but he started this, it was in a different area of interest. Intrust IT became a very profitable and growing IT service management company. It's voted as one of the best places to work, and the owner really had in mind, Tim Reddick had in mind, he wanted to sell the business to the employees when he was done. They practice something called open book management. If you look at the great game of business, that's something you go out and look, and they train that. So he completed the company, the sale, 30%. He's going to sell all of it to the future. And then his idea is he's going to take some of his earnings, his investment, and he's going to buy more companies and convert them to ESOPs down the road. That's what he's looking to do. So real interesting story. In this case, they're smaller. There's under 50 employees, but they're all well compensated, highly technically trained, and they were able, and the company was profitable enough that they were able to kind of overcome those hurdles that you might run into an ESOP with. That's, unfortunately, we just can't get into all those details in 45 minutes. So here's my contact information. Certainly can reach out to me. There's additional slides afterwards, just some thoughts, hopefully parting some words of wisdom. And if you're thinking of if there's any employees of companies who are thinking, boy, I'd like to buy out my owner, some of this is just the mindset. You have to think of what's the mindset of the owner, and how do you help get them to overcome this? So can you direct them to resources like ours, or what Hannah has, or other groups out there, to help really get them thinking down this path that there are other options? And, I think because of what I mentioned, the fatigue with business owners right now, now might be the right time to ask them. They might have their hands thrown up in the air, and now might be the right time to pursue that, where, end of 2019, they were counting their pennies before, they were counting their eggs before they're hatched, and, the coop got slammed. So they can't quite do that. So going forward, so this could be a real good time, a real opportunity to move forward with folks. So with that, open it up to questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Roy. Very informative. I learned a lot. So I see that we can everybody hear? Can you guys hear me? Okay. Yeah, we're good. Okay. I see we already have a question in the Q&A. This is from Kelsey. What is your approach in getting small business owners, mom and pop, trained and educated about the benefits of generating a well-defined exit plan during the earlier stages of their business operation? You will see a neighborhood mom and pop business around for years, exhausting their tenure into retirement, and then the next day closed.
Yeah, it's a challenge. We've over the years, we've changed our approach. I don't think it's one approach. It's several approaches. How do you get out and connect with people who can help influence those people, those business owners? We've done a lot of programming with the SBDCs around the state. So, they'll put on programming. It's a good engagement to get out and they'll invite their people. We do a lot of webinars. We work with partners like Hannah getting out. But oftentimes, these business owners don't want to come out in public. Yeah, because, again, they may be 75 and everybody knows they're going to have to sell at some point in time, but they don't want to tell anybody. So they're very private people that way. I think what we're hoping to do more is how do we drive that engagement with key centers of influence, the accountants, bankers, and others. If we can help educate them, and can they pass that on? I think the biggest challenge we've had is really engaging accountants. They're the ones who have the most favor with these business owners, and oftentimes they think if they open the door to this type of activity, they're going to lose control. If the business goes out of business, they lose control totally. But if they work with somebody on that transition, they can remain engaged with that group going forward at some level. So I think it has to be a multiple approach to just try to find ways to get engaged. If employees come, oftentimes the business owner might not want to hear it from them, but do they know who the accountant is? Is there a way for us to contact other people to get engaged and start that conversation early? As well, I think I'll just say about the baby boomer generation, maybe compared to Gen X or millennials. I think Gen X more so than the baby boomers, and millennial, I'm sure much more so than the baby boomers. They're thinking about their exit, their transition, their next gig, if you will, much further down the road than baby boomers. So it's probably more of a 20-year problem than a problem into the future. It is a problem into the future, but I think it's more about how do we reach the baby boomers. In Gen Xers, we should be engaging them now to have that conversation. So 10 years out, they're already they've got a plan in place and they're moving forward.
Great. So this is from Hannah to everyone here. It seems like the role of company culture is vital in determining if employee ownership is feasible, let alone has the potential to be successful. Can you talk about the approaches to building a culture that fosters employee ownership, or what types of culture create successful transitions?
I think it's more of the open culture. Talked a little bit about great game of business. There's more culture training going on out there right now, but it's getting through the mindset of the business owner that they need to engage their employees, and they want more out of their employees. Well, they need to give up a little bit of that control, and they need to provide more assignments to them. My days before doing this, even before the company, I was a commercial lender, and I always felt like I learned so much about the company walking through the shop rather than sitting in the office taking it, because you can walk through and see. If there's a business you walk through and the owner's given the tour and you get interrupted, somebody comes up and they need an answer quick, and the owner is willing to interrupt, it doesn't matter to me, but if the owner is willing to interrupt and answer that question, you can tell that there's some level of engagement or respect, that the question is critical to that business owner. It's important to the company. It's important to the employees. if you have that type of culture, you know, there's free flow of conversation and activity. There's you know, really some commitment to that employee that they're giving them a voice in what they're doing. Compared to the shop where you walk in and, you know, you walk in with the owner and everybody scampers to the corners like rats, then, you know, it's a command and control. So, you know, so if you walk through these companies, you can see what that is. And I think it's less and less so of dictatorial type of control, but it's difficult if you don't have that respect between both sides. And the owner says, well, I'm going to sell you the company, and, you know, they've never allowed them a voice in anything in the past. You know, they really wonder what sort of bill of goods they're getting sold. So that's a big hurdle to get through. But I think you know, you have to, if the employees, you know, the workers are willing to kind of step up and say, hey, I found, you know, this type of resource. This is an opportunity for us to move forward and maybe solve some, you know, provide more solutions. That's great. But you just have to chip away at that type of business owner mindset and see if you can build that over time. They can see some benefit, so they open up to it. It's just a challenge. But I think if you're doing more, I think you know, the small business development centers, chambers, other groups are bringing those resources in. I think the more opportunity to kind of open the door to exposing those business owners to that type of understanding could be a way to help smooth that transition into creating the culture you want.
Great. Do we have any other questions for Roy? Questions, comments, thoughts?
Roy, this is Hannah. I have one question that I know is not something you can do in just a minute or two, but you touched really briefly on financing, and we know that financing can be a struggle for all businesses, let alone worker co-ops and cooperatives. Can you talk a little bit about what that financing model can look like for employee-owned business transitions, or you know, common challenges that you see, things like that?
Sure. And I think that's probably, yeah, it's very murky, and it's gotten even worse given COVID, what banks or groups are willing to do. You know, I think the more community banks, if you're approaching, there's going to be a layering of financing. You know, if you're transitioning, today's environment, the business owner is going to have to carry some paper, as they say. They're going to have to finance part of it, and, you know, that's on the back end. So you might put together some financing from a local bank, especially the smaller companies. That's an opportunity. I think bankers are more open to the idea that, you know, I've loaned money to this company for years and years. I know what the company is. You know, maybe there's some concerns about the management change and how they get there. But if those companies that go out of business, the local banks won't have any clients. So they need to find a way to make that happen. So the banks will come in. There's a couple different levels that they'll look at. You know, the more the more asset rich they have, the hard assets, equipment, real estate, and that sort of thing, the more that they can lend, at least on that piece, as long as there's adequate cash flow. So if you have a company that, you know, has bricks and mortar and machinery and that sort of things, and it's all valuable, there's going to be more financing. So you kind of have to figure out how much will a bank lend, plus give me operating to carry the company forward. Other sources out there, I know the co-op Cincy just announced their source. So that's getting a different Zoom invitation. So other sources out there, co-op Cincy just launched. So there's also CDFIs, community development financial institutions, are taking interest, so they can help provide some of that funding. SBA has somewhat come out with the guarantees. I think it's still murky on how that's going to work exactly. But you'd have to plan on a tiered layer, and that business owner isn't going to walk away with all their cash unless there's something really phenomenal about that organization. They've got some sort of intellectual property that just makes them gold, and they're selling to a strategic buyer, and strategic buyer will write the big check. So I think it's a different layer, and the buyer's going to have to kind of sit back and wait to get their money. They might get some interest, but they're going to have to wait to get all their money. I think more funding is developing, but it's still murky, and till we get on the other side of COVID, I think there's going to be some fidgeting by the financial institutions as to how much they want to fund. And of course, in an employee-owned co-op, there's going to have to be some funding for membership, and I think engaging some of the co-op lenders might help get there to help that membership funding if the folks don't have cash to put in.
Yeah. Roy, just a quick thought here that's related to Hannah's question. What about credit unions? Because in a sense they are employee-owned institutions, and I've always thought that they might be more inclined to look toward this type of a business model. But when I look out there, the evidence doesn't really demonstrate that.
I think there's one of the reasons goes back to how much business lending credit unions have done or could do. I think commercial banks have done a real good job building a fence around business lending, and so they don't have the depth and expertise. Yes, they are a co-op and they're brethren there, but I'm not sure they have the depth and expertise, and usually it's much more limited funding than what they do. Now, I know there are some credit unions, I think, outside the United States. I think there's one in Vancouver that's really committing to it. But their bread and butter are more consumer type of funding. And so getting them to bridge this is probably more of a challenge. I think you can get there, but it's probably going to take time to develop that.
Well, Roy, I wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us and with all of the attendees this morning. Really a lot of information to digest, and thanks for sharing your contact information. I would encourage participants who have more questions to look at Ohio Employee Ownership's website. There's quite a few resources there, and reach out to Roy and his team. They're there to help, so please utilize their resources. And then if you'd like to learn more about cooperatives generally, or you'd like to learn more about the Appalachia Cooperates Initiative, there's our contact information on the slide here for the Center for Cooperatives and in the College of Food, Ag, and Environmental Science at Ohio State. We're happy to talk about the initiative. We're always brainstorming the next learning opportunity. So if you have ideas, please feel free to send them our way or send them to Todd. And we talk about what those opportunities are and how we can bring those to Central Appalachia and just build the awareness of this model going forward. So thanks for being with us today, and have a good one.